Well, here we are, finally at the end of this series. I do thank you for joining me. My name is Mindy Mandell. And in this video, I'm going to talk about propositions 209 through 211 in Proclus's Elements of Theology. I will put the playlist here for anyone who would like to see the full playlist. And throughout this whole series, I've been using the E.R. Dodds translation. For those of you who don't have the paper version, there is a link in the description box for a PDF. There are just 3 more propositions to look at. But with these 3, we will be able to put together the final picture of the realm of soul as Proclus sees it. I will start this video with proposition 209. And I really like this one. This one deals with the vehicle of every particular soul. Particular souls, remember, are rational souls like you and I. And Proclus is focusing on the soul's vehicle. The vehicle is that permanent, non-physical body that I focused on in my last video. Now, this vehicle, or first body as he also calls it, was initially introduced in Proposition 196. And that brings us here. Every participated soul makes use of a first body, and this first body is perpetual. It has a constitution without temporal origin, and it is exempt from decay. And therefore we saw that it cannot be physical. Okay, so now let's see what Proposition 209 is about. It reads, "The vehicle of every particular soul descends by the addition of vestures or clothing, increasingly material, and ascends in company with the soul through divestment of all that is material and recovery of its proper form, after the analogy of the soul which makes use of it. For the soul descends by the acquisition of irrational principles of life, and it ascends by putting off all those faculties, tending to temporal process with which it was invested in its descent, and becoming clean and bare of all such faculties as serve the uses of the process." Okay, this one is confusing at first. A hint of what is going on is at the end. Proclus presents the ascension as the result of a process of becoming clean and bare. This is purification. Once we see this, we realize that what the soul needs to be purified of is more than just the vestiges of the physical body, but also the false beliefs that make the separation so difficult. Recognizing this pulls us back to this statement. Irrational principles of life. These are picked up by the soul. The rational soul takes on heavier, more material layers of energy that pull it into the realm of nature. It is being in physical form, though, that pulls us down into Plato's proverbial cave, the realm of belief. And this is why these vestures are an analogy to the soul. What I see going on here is that a soul reincarnates so as to tackle whatever false beliefs it has not yet worked through. It is these faculties tending to temporal process that compel a soul to reincarnate. And it is the dropping of beliefs that result in a soul's ascent to what some might call enlightenment. In addition to a feeling of brightness, the soul literally becomes lighter by dropping those heavy vestiges that pull it down into process. And Proclus is showing us here that this is more than just a mechanical separation of the rational soul from the body. It involves the dropping of beliefs that inevitably get picked up during the descent. I want to go through the explanation before I comment any further. For the congenital vehicles imitate the lives of the souls which use them and move everywhere with their movements. Congenital means innate. So these are those non-physical bodies that are always present with particular souls. And Proclus is telling us here that this vehicle imitates the life of the soul that uses it, and it moves with that soul's movements. Now he will give us some examples of this. The intellectual activity of certain souls they reflect by circular revolutions. Circular revolution sounds to me like ousia, and focusing on the intellectual activity of certain souls leads me to think that this is describing a soul that is participating nous. The declension of others by a subsidence into process, into the realm of time and space. So this describes being pulled down by false beliefs. The purgation of yet others by a conversion towards the immaterial. And purgation, of course, is the throwing off of false beliefs. This lifts souls and their permanent vehicles with them towards the immaterial. Any of you who have ever cleared away a false belief, just dropped it completely, perhaps you know the feeling of lightness that accompanies that purgation. It is really an amazing feeling. Proclus here is giving us the metaphysics behind that phenomenon. It is not just a feeling or something that you imagined. You literally are shedding a layer of dense, heavy energy. And so when you put the three examples in this sentence together, you have souls participating nous, souls in declension, and souls that are ascending. The three stages or moments of a rational soul's activity. For because in virtue of the very existence of the souls, these vehicles are animated by them and are congenital to them. They undergo all manner of changes in sympathy with the soul's activities and accompany them everywhere. Again, these vehicles refers to the permanent non-physical vehicle. This was introduced in Proposition 196, which I've already reviewed. This vehicle is animated by the soul that it participates, and so it therefore is affected by that soul. And again, Proclus is going to give us some examples. When the souls suffer passion, they suffer with them. When the soul identifies with bodies such that it has attachment to the physical world and the life of the individual, these vehicles take on layers of increasingly material vestures or clothing of sorts. This is true whether the attachment is enjoyable or in the form of anguish. I just want to note here that the word suffer is in the neutral sense of passively experiencing or enduring. It's in contrast to actively doing. The vehicle is restored along with the soul because they have been stripped of that heavy clothing and returned to their natural state. What Proclus is here calling vestures, I have been taking as a metaphor for what we generally call layers of self-image or the ego self. It is the persona that we identify with. But this is not the true self. This is what blocks us from knowing the true self. We come to understand this for ourselves once we've stripped a few layers away. That's when we get the first glimpse of the truth beyond the images that we have been identifying with. When they are led upwards, they rise with them, craving their own perfection. For all things are perfected when they attain to their proper integrity. Early on, this persona is what we imagine reincarnates and is immortal. But it is not. It is actually what strips away to reveal the true self that is beyond all images. And this insight can be frightening at first. The person you know yourself to be is all that you know yourself to be. The divine self, that's a theory in books, perhaps a vague sense that you accept as real, but it feels far away, it's out there. Yet over time, as our studies deepen, we learn not to identify with the layers of clothing that weigh down the soul. And this is why I personally think that enlightenment takes time. Theoretically, the recognition of the self can occur in an instant. In fact, it's actually outside of time. Yet it takes time to familiarize ourselves with truth and to shift our identity from the images that we have spent a lifetime learning and reinforcing to the true self that is beyond them. This next proposition nicely accompanies the previous one. Proposition 210 reads, "Every congenital psychic vehicle keeps the same shape and size perpetually, but it is seen as greater or smaller and in varying shapes by reason of the addition or removal of other bodies." So in Proposition 209, we saw the addition or removal of other bodies, or what Proclus likened to layers of clothing. Now he is clarifying that the natural vehicle appears to change size and shape because of these additional bodies. In actuality, though, it never changes. It stays the same throughout all time. And he starts off the explanation by stating that it has its being from an unmoved cause. So Proclus is building on Proposition 207, which simply states that the vehicle of a particular soul has an unmoved cause. And here it is as a quick reminder, the vehicle of every particular soul has been created by an unmoved cause. And so here's what follows from the cause of the vehicle being unmoved. It is plain that both its shape and its size are determined for it by its cause, and both are immutable and invariable. So this vehicle is not moldable or changeable, even though we as people are molded by our experiences and our learning. Now this apparent paradox is addressed in the next sentence. Yet its appearances at different times are diverse, and it seems now greater, now smaller. And so that is the contrast between truth and appearance. Therefore, it is by reason of other bodies, which are added to it from the material elements and again removed, that it appears of such and such a shape and magnitude. And so it must be those other bodies that give it this appearance. The takeaway from this is that all of us have an essence that is pure and good. We take on many different ways of life and belief systems and so on. Even the most hurtful among us, though, have this core that is pure. And when we combine this proposition with Proposition 209, we see that purification is absolutely possible. And now we have reached the end. Proposition 211. Every particular soul, when it descends into temporal process, descends entire. There is not a part of it which remains above, and a part which descends. This is a famous proposition, if for no other reason, because it is often pointed to as a divergence in thoughts between Proclus and Plotinus, who insisted that part of the soul remains above. So here's Proclus's reasoning. He starts by demonstrating the impossibility of his conclusion not being true. He says, "Suppose that some part of the soul remains in the intelligible." It will exercise perpetual intellection, either without transition from object to object or transitively. So if soul remains in the intelligible, it would always exercise intellection. Now he has to show why this would be a problem. And he gave us two options here, either without transition or movement from object to object, or with such a transition. He'll start with the case of no transition. But if without transition, it will be an intelligence and not a fragment of a soul. And the soul in question will be one which directly participates in intelligence. And this is impossible. So if it exercised perpetual intellection, then it would directly participate intellect, which is not the nature of the particular soul. Remember, the particular soul is in that third rank. It is the intermediate rank that directly participates intellect. And this is the citation of Proposition 202. This proposition focuses on that intermediate grade of soul, such as daimon. All souls which are attendant upon gods and perpetually in their company are inferior to the divine grade, but are exalted above the particular souls. And notice the part in yellow about particular souls. On the other hand, the particular souls are deprived even of attachment to an intelligence, being unable directly to participate intellectual existence. So particular souls do not directly participate intellect. It is through the daimon that we connect with nous. So now we need to consider souls that are perpetually exercising intellection, but transitively. What would this even look like? And if transitively, the part which has perpetual intellection and that which has intermittent intellection will be one substance, or ousia. If transitive, it would transition from object to object like the souls that have intermittent intellection. But if even these souls had perpetual intellection, then what really would be the difference between them? They would be the same with those souls that are not transitive. And this is a violation of Proposition 184. This is impossible, Proclus tells us, for they differ in kind, as has been shown in Proposition 184. This is the proposition that started this whole section on souls. It posits 3 grades of souls: divine souls, an intermediate grade that directly participates intellect, and a 3rd grade of particular souls that participates intellect through the higher grade. Now, if particular souls could transition from object to object without ever changing from intelligence to unintelligence, then they would be the same as the rank above them. And this, Proclus tells us, is impossible. There must be a rank that is subject to change. And now Proclus is going to give us one more argument. He writes, "It is, moreover, unaccountable that the highest part of the soul, if it be perpetually perfect, does not master the other faculties and render them also perfect. If the particular soul enjoyed the same constant intellection enjoyed by souls of higher ranks, why would it ever descend? Why take on heavier bodies of belief rather than perfect itself? This seems impossible to Proclus, and so he concludes, therefore, every particular soul descends entire." And so now that we have reached the end, it is time to look at the entire book as a whole. Proclus presented us a divine logos. Starting from the first principle, he showed us divinity as a providential oneness that unfolds being. This being turns on itself and knows itself, and in its perfection it is a divine intellect. In its perfection it generates the physical realm. Perfect wholes are never infertile. It is soul that carries the activity of divine mind into the physical realm. At each ranking in the metaphysical hierarchy, each seeks its own proper perfection. We as rational souls find ourselves in the cycle of descent and ascent, but our perfection is achieved, as we saw in Proposition 209, with the perfection that allows for an ascent that remains in the company of nous, enjoying the company of gods. Well, it's been a long journey through this text. To anyone who stayed with the study from start to finish, I commend your commitment, and I do hope that you found this series rewarding. Now, this is not the kind of book that you read just one time and then never look at again. I do recommend going through it again, reviewing some things in it that you found most challenging, and also maybe even checking some other translations. Another thing I would recommend is going on to Proclus's Theology of Plato. It's much more detailed. There's a lot of overlap between the two books, but there's a lot more detail in the Theology. Whereas the Elements is known for its brevity, the Theology is known for its lengthiness. I would actually be interested in going through the Theology again myself. And to that end, I was thinking about setting up a study group. I imagine that anybody who went through this study from start to finish would be a likely candidate for such a group, so that's why I am putting the invitation here. I do not charge people to talk to me, and actually I hope to keep growing myself through our conversations. This would be a private group. I won't be putting any videos on YouTube. Those of you who are shy about the camera don't have to worry about that. So I hope that there are a few of you out there who are interested in diving more deeply into these issues. If you are interested, please drop me an email. There is a link in the description box. It's all about Platonism at gmail.com, but you can just click on the link. And in your email, please let me know also what time zone you are in, because there are people from, all over the globe watching these videos, and it does make scheduling a little difficult, but we'll work it out. And again, to everyone watching, I do thank you for your time and commitment to this project, and I wish you well on your journey, wherever it may lead.